Hey, what's up, guys? It's K-Rod here. I'm back with another good video for you guys, for any of you guys that want to listen. Uh, let's talk about female boxing. For those of you that don't know, I'm a huge advocate for women's boxing. I love every single woman that steps inside the ring to give the fans the enjoyment of the sport that we all love, which is boxing. Boxing is one of the best sports in the world. Should be number one in the world, but sadly, the sport of boxing has been monopolized, or if I should say, manipulated by state interference, in the sense of giving legalized protection to sanctioning bodies to corrupt the sport more and allow certain schemes to go on behind closed doors that makes the sport worse, because the sport of boxing is not like, how should I say, it's not marketized to a point where the regulation is not held by the market itself, and it's more so held by a state arbitrator that holds that market to be unfair and unjust. So even though that, I'm not even going to go full-blown economics, in this video, but just to simplify it, there's too much state interference in any market you see in a state-controlled, economy. So when we look at sports is heavily politicized in certain sectors, like the sport of boxing or the sport of soccer, and I would probably say basketball, but basketball is kind of like a little less, difficult to actually compete in, because it's like you're not putting your life on the line in basketball, versus boxing, wrestling, hockey. I mean, those sports have more danger to it, but the most corrupt sport in the world would be would be boxing. I'm sorry. I was gonna say basketball would be the least corrupt sport in the world, but for boxing is extremely corrupt. We've seen mass loads of cheating, fighters getting on drugs, getting on performance enhancers, promoters not promoting fighters correctly, fighters being given legalized protection to get away from other fighters that want to get a world title shot, fighters that don't have their records kept properly, fighters that are on the hope list, like Vasyl Lomachenko, that had his loss, removed on ESPN, or even what you see now with Tyson Fury trying to fake COVID-19, with the virus, try to go out there, at a UFC fight, and then sooner than later he was out in, what I guess, of the UK, chilling in a jacuzzi with his boys, including Joseph Parker. Yeah, I fucking called your ass out. But nah, it's just like there's too much corruption in the sport, man. It's like, there's too much ducking, there's too much evil shit in the sport, and I don't even know like what the fuck to say, honestly. Like, I'm actually gonna probably rant about women's boxing pretty long here, but let's talk about female boxing. I love female boxing. I grew up watching boxing ever since I was born. I would probably say boxing has kind of been, in the family bloodline, as far as just me being connected to the sport. I box. I don't box as much because I work a lot, but when I get back into the gym, I'm actually pretty good as a southpaw. I look up to all my southpaw fighters, except for Lomachenko. I don't like his ass. Fuck him. He's like one of the weaker southpaws. But for female boxing, I love all the women. I love Layla Ali. I love Christy Martin. I love, Lucia Riker, Mia St. John, Belinda Laraquente, Samia Anani, Denise Merides, who else? Regina Halmich. I like everybody, like I can name you more fighters, I like Melissa Hernandez. She was kicking ass. Jelena Marjanovic. I love the Queen, Miss Beautiful Amanda, the real deal Holyfield, Serrano 2.0. I just love every single woman that actually wants to fight the best. Not women that are gonna duck like Katie Taylor and all them, I would say flaky women. Women that don't want to be exposed in the ring But I like to see those type of fighters get exposed because that's what keeps the sport alive. But hands down, I love the two women that are actually keeping the sport alive, which would be Clarissa Shields and Amanda Serrano, the Queen. Both of them queens. They're awesome. I would love to meet them. But let's talk about women's boxing, man. This shit really gets put under the rug way too much, and people try to hide this into the sand, like as if this isn't a fucking issue. But women's boxing is absolutely garbage. I'm just really going to keep that honest. Please don't hate me for anybody that watches this or tries to share it to any female fighters, but women's boxing is shit. I'm just keeping it real with you guys. I don't see the sport of female boxing getting any better. I personally follow the WBAN women's Facebook group, or women's boxing Facebook group, ran by Sue TL Fox, and I respect Sue. She's a good old lady. She used to be a fighter herself. I don't know what she did as far as career goes, but it seems like a lot of people try to run with this narrative to say women's boxing is booming, and I disagree with that, because if women's boxing was booming, why aren't we having more women on bigger cards? Why isn't there a female fight out of every single big card that we see? At least if we could get like 2 to 3 fights every single card, that would help women's boxing. If you promoted women on top of a male card, that would be awesome. But unfortunately, you don't get something like that. You don't have like an Errol Spence versus Manny Pacquiao female undercard lineup. You don't have at least like 4 or 5 female fights on that card. And me personally, I would like that, because you realize how much money and how much exposure a woman would get on that card, and that should be like that all the time. But you never get to see that, because why? Because women are poorly fucking promoted, and 2, there is shitty marketing for women's boxing. The only reason why I keep saying this is because I want women's boxing to grow, but it does not start with political legislation. It does not start by just, hey, like, let's just get the state involved and let's just try to make these sanction bodies allow women to be on bigger cards. No. It's more like the market itself needs to answer in a competitive manner to make women heard more by putting them on there. See, now, before anybody tries to come at me with that promoter bullshit, I will say this for once, is that it's poor fucking marketing. Women who are free agents that don't have a promoter, don't have a manager, look, I get that, and I understand you. I feel you. Because it's like, if I were to wrestle after high school, and let's just say wrestling had, like a market where you could compete at a high level, and you can go to those like events where you compete in high level tournaments, but you're in like a fight league. It's similar to like the UFC in a way. Wrestling would make a lot of money, which I know people would say, well, then go join the WWE, even though that the WWE isn't real wrestling. But as far as other wrestling competitions, the only thing that wrestlers go to is the Olympics or go to college. But that's pretty much it. I don't think there's actually professional wrestling networks out there. I'm pretty sure that there are, but it's like nobody doesn't ever think about that. Like, people don't watch that, and I get that, because like the sport of wrestling would just be converted into UFC. You would just bring yourself to the UFC, and then there you go, because wrestling is very common by trying to get that style in there. See, now when it comes to the sport of boxing is not that difficult to promote a fight. But I understand why the difficulty is there, especially if you're doing it by yourself, because I kind of come up with that argument with my friends whenever I talk boxing, to say, how do you start out as a boxer? Who do you go to when you want to get your first fight? Do you have to put money down to like pay your fighter in order to get your license ready? Which, I know, like, I guess like all you have to do is just get your boxing license, and then once that's set in stone, then boom, you're a professional fighter. You don't need to have any amateur experience. You just need to go in there, and then when you're ready, you're ready. And I know, like, down in Mexico, you could pay for, you know, but like, I'm not so sure if it's true, but if you want to start boxing, you could literally straight up fight inside like a bar, and I guess they call it like bar fights or professional bar fights, where like, up and coming prospect fighters get their first couple fights down in Mexico, and then it helps them build up their career. And then once they have a record, then they can get notified by like a manager or some shit like that, and then they can like go up higher into the professional rankings. And then, if they want to become their own promoter, they can do something like that. But 9 times out of 10, most fighters just go with a promoter. They don't really care, and that's not a good idea, honestly. Like that's why, like, that's why it's so difficult to make it big inside the game, because you don't know what the fuck you're getting yourself into. 9 times out of 10, when you're doing business with like a manager that you don't know if he or she is going to be, in their best interests or be in your best interests, you got to watch out for that. You got to watch out for promoters that try to screw you over. Like, definitely, like with like guys like Eddie Hearn, Bob Arum, or shit, maybe even guys like who else? I'm pretty sure there's plenty of other promoters out there, but the most corrupt promoters that we could see now in the sport of boxing would be Bob Arum and Eddie Hearn. Even though Eddie Hearn, he claims to say he cares about his fighters, but he really doesn't, and that's not good, because those fighters want to make it big. And it's not like boxing is like some movie star type of job. This is a job where you're putting your life on the line, and you're fighting somebody out of pure malicious intent in the ring. Which, I'm not to say that you shouldn't be boxing for that reason. Boxing is a sport, but it should be a sport where it's a gladiator sport, where two athletes get paid good for their services, and they're recognized in the sport. You know what I'm saying? So I would say for women, it's even worse, because like, we've seen it with so many other girls. Like, I'll use like Maureen Shea. She recently came out with an Instagram post where she talked about herself not fighting as much anymore, because of all the shitty offers that she's been receiving. She got offered to fight a world champion, but the only catch was that she was not going to get her belt. She was going to basically fight for like $7,000 against her, something like that. But for shit like that, it's like, I am totally against that shit. And I think boxing needs to be set up like the NBA or the UFC, in a way where you have competing market agencies that actually give a like, they actually care about your financial success, and you fight up against top tier competition, and then every time when you keep winning, or if you keep facing the best, your pay increases based on your performance. And if you do well, and people want to come see you, aka the fans, then you should get paid through the network, through your fans, because the people that put money down to come see you, all those proceeds should come to you. It shouldn't be held through a promoter. It should be held through a network that gives you the spotlight to be at, to have your fans come to the fight. And if people like you, then you work your way up through the ladder to be number one in your division. And a lot of people would say, well, then how would that determine who is like the best fighter in the world? Because I have that talk with so many other people, I would say, like BFTB and Kano, and they bring up that issue to say, well, they like that idea, and the only issue is just simply that how do you get to that point? Because there's so much money involved in boxing, because there's so much corruption with the sanctioning bodies, because obviously there's a lot of state monopolized influence that gives legalized protection to these sanctioning bodies, like the WBC, the IBF, the WBA, and the WBO. I mean, the only fair sanctioning body out there would be the IBO, and the IBO, they're actually like the most cleanest sanctioning body ever, because they actually care about their fighters, and they have a interim title, and they just have the IBO title. That's it. They have the number one fight the number two for the mandatory, or the number one fights, with the champion. It's not no bullshit where they just select out of the bunch of who gets to be like a mandatory. It's set in stone to say when you're number one in their rankings, you fight the champion. That's it. That's how it should be in boxing. It's not like you should have to be fighting this guy, that guy, and then every other fight is like a world title eliminator, but you're not so sure if you're going to get the mandatory spot. Nah, fuck that shit. You should beat every single guy to get to the top. If I'm ranked number 9 in the world in, let's just say, the WBC, and I beat a guy that's number 3 in the rankings, he should go down 2 ranks, and I should take his number 3 spot. Simple. If I'm number 9 and he's number 3, if I beat him, he goes down 3-4 placements, and I go up, like, let's just say 3-4 placements up. I'm number 5 in the world, or I'm number 3 in the world. Every placement should not just be like, okay, the number 7 needs to beat the number 6, but if I, number 7, beat the number 1 guy in the world, and let's just say, the champion is unifying with another champion, but this guy is at the mandatory, so if I beat him, well, let's just say if he faces me and I beat him, he'll still become the mandatory, but I'll be the next in line to be the mandatory after. So that should be like the fair concept of giving a number 1 guy his opportunity before he faces, or before he faces another opponent that could possibly take his or her spot. So I think, like, for female boxing, in order to make it, a lot more concise and easy to, like, make the sport grow faster, is simply just exposure. You just need to put more women on cards. I love watching certain female prospects fight. There's certain fighters that I like fight, or that I like watching, or that I like watch, that I like to watch, that are fighting. Zarina McCoy, Kenya Enriquez, all those ladies. They're very talented fighters. The only downside, as far as like what women don't get, is simply just TV time. I interviewed Noemi Vasquez in the past, and I asked her about that same situation years ago, and I still say it's true to this day. She said mainly the issue is just that women don't get enough TV time. And that I definitely agree with, because it shouldn't be that difficult to put anybody on a TV network, especially women, and you could just put it on like a big male card, and boom, there you go. If you could just have at least like 3 to 4 female fights every single night, that would be awesome. Have it on ESPN, have it on DAZN, have it on Triller. Well, no, fuck Triller. I don't think Triller is gonna do any good, but have it on any competing network that is willing to put the females out on the spotlight, because the more spotlight that they get, the easier things will become, because there's some really good female fighters out there, but they're just not really talked about. Like, who's that one chick? She's out of Gervonta Davis's stable. Mia Ellis, she's that 21-year-old girl from Baltimore, Maryland. I think she fights at like super featherweight or super bantamweight. I forgot. Yeah, I think she fights at 130. I'm not too sure, but she's a very, very good fighter. She has a really good jab, very good boxing technique, has amazing reads on defense. She knows how to crack people, and it's like she's not even talked about, It's like, why the hell is it like why the hell is it just that girls like Michaela Mayer, she gets all the shine, but women like Alicia Baumgartner, she's not on there. She should be on there. You know what I'm saying? Like, Alicia shouldn't need to be signed with a promoter just to get her name out there. Every woman or every female fighter should be a free agent of their own to fight on whatever network that they want, and there shouldn't be no setbacks, because the more you do that, the more you hold back females' careers, and then it makes it harder for those females to come up and actually do something. because it's not going to bring in any revenue to garner more fans to the sport of women's boxing, because nobody doesn't ever think about what women do. Yeah, I get it. Like there's some females out there that are not that heavily talented. There's very few in the world that are really good, like Clarissa Shields, Amanda Serrano, Sinisa Estrada. Shit, even Zarina. She's fighting for a world title for the WIBA, but if she wins, then good for her. But still, she's not talked about. But she's still like a very dangerous fighter, and it's like nobody, nobody don't want to acknowledge that. Fuck that, you know what I'm saying? So I think the best way to fix it is that there needs to be more media attention on it, and you have to, and like there needs to be more encouragement to put more women out there on all cards. It doesn't matter. It should be like I'm not even trying to say centralized in a way, but it needs to be more marketized to bring more women to these bigger events. Because if you do bring an Amanda Serrano to, let's just say, an Errol Spence versus Manny Pacquiao card, which she'll be fighting on the Jake Paul Tyron Woodley card, even though that will be a big card that will be in Cleveland, but it's like nobody shouldn't need to see boxers be on a YouTuber undercard. That's what I don't want to see. I don't want to see Amanda on that. I want to see her on the Wilder Fury card. I want to see her on Errol Spence versus Manny Pacquiao. Or shit, I want to see her on a Canelo undercard. That would be awesome. She would make so much money, because why? Because there's more higher populations of fans that will come to that event. Not saying that Jake Paul, he can't sell out, because he can sell out. Jake Paul is going to be a big name within the sport of boxing. But as far as what he's doing to make the game better, he is doing a good job. I'm not going to disagree with that. But when it comes to like his style of what he promotes, it's like Amanda, she should not be there. She should be at an actual pro boxing event. Not something where you get to see a bunch of YouTubers or TikTokers do their little events. Nah, fuck that shit. That, that shit is good for, the sport of boxing. If people want to set up their worthless events where you have some female, YouTubers versus TikTokers event, that would be awesome. I don't care to watch that. I'll probably watch highlights, but if I were to see, let's just say Clarissa Shields hold down a main event headline at Vegas, her fighting, I don't know, I'll just say Katie Taylor. Even though Katie Taylor, she fights at 135, but let's just say Katie, she was built to fight at, 154. That would make some pretty good headline. But as far as the names go, it's not to the level of a male status where if you hear the name, let's just say Andy Ruiz or Sean Porter or Danny Garcia or Jaron Ennis, if that were to ever come to mind, people know those guys, so that's going to garner the fans to come over to see Jaron, see Danny, see Sean Porter, see Terrence Crawford. That will definitely help the sport grow, because there's more exposure of doing more of those type of headlining events. And I think what women need to be doing more is advocating for them to be put on bigger cards, because I think what's going to happen is that the more less exposure that females get, the harder it is for those women to make more money, and then they're not able to get co-sponsored in the future, and not being able to be talked about more for more fights in the future, which I don't see that to be such a big issue. But then on top of that, the more promotion, the better, because I think it's simply just a lack of marketing and just poor promoting out of a promoter's hands, and it should be held by the fans and the networks that are going to put them out every single time when they get back on, get back on TV. That's basically what I'm saying. Just put women more on televised events, and boom, there you go. How do you think men get popular in the sport of boxing? It's not just because of how well they fight. Well, I would say yes to that. Part of it is you get big in boxing by winning. by how you perform in your fights. But it's mainly just due to promotion. Because, we all know Canelo Alvarez, but Canelo Alvarez is not the biggest star in the world. He's not really a pay-per-view star, but people know who Canelo Alvarez is because he got hyped up by Eddie Hearn and Oscar De La Hoya. So, everybody knows that Canelo Alvarez is a big star, and Canelo, he doesn't need a promoter to do that. Everyone knew who he was coming out of Mexico, but when he came over to the States, it's like people still don't know who Canelo is. Only like a select few of American fans really give a shit about Canelo. But if you have, let's just say, Mariana Juarez, and you promote her with Canelo, people will get to start to know Mariana a lot more along with Canelo. Because one, if you have it in like a Mexican theme where more Mexican females are put on bigger Mexican fight cards, it would actually help them more because one, they're getting that exposure, and two, they know that they're going to be talked about next time when they get back into the ring because people know who those females are. Like, I would like to see another Mariana Juarez on a good card. I would like to see her on PBC. I would like to see her on Top Rank. That would be fun. But guess what? The people that are running that shit in charge is Mr. Eddie Hearn and Bob Arum, that are too selfish enough to not give those women a chance and actually put them on, any fight card to give them the opportunity. Like the last time I've ever seen a Top Rank female undercard bout was Michaela Mayer versus, who's that girl? Erica Farias? Yeah, Erica Farias. And that was a good fight, but it's like, why can't that be like that all the time? It should be like that all the time. And I don't ever want to see another event where there's only just one female fight every so often. It's not, or every less often, to say the least. But it's just like, it's really sad and it's really pathetic because women deserve better. You know what I'm saying? So, I think that's what needs to be championed more because there's some girls out there that really know how to fight. And, I actually do believe that the more times you put more women on bigger cards like that, the easier their pay will get one day, and then that'll help the sport grow. But I think it's just simply just poor marketing because promoters don't really care about female fighters enough, where female fighters have to do it on their own. And I don't have any respect for that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wanna see a female fighter automatically become a big star, at the end of the day, if they're good enough, and not just put some bum female fighters, together on every card. It should be good enough to a point where you see two girls go at it, and then whoever comes out on top wins. I don't see how difficult that is. The networks and the fans that show up to their fights should be the ones determining how good of an athlete they are to make it to the top. So that's pretty much what I really have to say. More points I could add on to it is just simply that there's a lack of promotion, there's a lack of marketability, and there's a lack of notoriety within female fighters. A lot of these girls that really talk crap about other girls, they don't even help each other out, to say the least. I understand Katie Taylor, she tries to act like she's like the greatest woman ever to live, but I'm sorry, Katie Taylor, like, you're just being used as a pawn by Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn could easily cut you off, and you don't need to, he doesn't need Katie Taylor on his own. Eddie Hearn can easily just say, look, Katie Taylor, she's nowhere near the level I need her to be at, so I need to cut her off. He can easily do that by tomorrow. But it's like, Katie's like the only woman in the world at a female boxing that's getting a big payday, which would be, I think, like $1 million every time she fights, which I'd say that's good, but it's like, is it good for women's boxing? No, it's not. If she's getting $1 million, why can't Amanda Serrano get $1 million, right? So, it makes zero fucking sense, and it's really stupid because what should be happening more is that the best need to fight the best more. Katie Taylor, she ducked Amanda Serrano, point blank and simple. When Amanda Serrano had the deal made out with Katie and her team with Eddie Hearn, and Katie Taylor came back and tried to fuck up Amanda Serrano's contract negotiations, and that's when Amanda said, "Nah, fuck that. I'm not gonna get lowballed." And Eddie Hearn and Katie just went a different direction and basically ducked away, from the fight. Because Katie, she obviously wants to price herself out more because she knows that if she loses that fight and Amanda beats the crap out of her, then she wants more out of out of that pocket. Because why? She's Katie Taylor and she's the quote unquote undisputed champion. No, that's not how it works. And before we even get into the A side B side bullshit, Katie Taylor has never fought pay-per-view. Let's just let's just make that clear. If we're gonna make things fair, it better be 50-50 because Amanda and Katie Taylor have never fought pay-per-view. But I guarantee you, if that shit was pay-per-view, you sell that out at the, let's just say, Vegas, at the Virgin Hotel, or wherever. It doesn't matter. Anywhere that makes a lot of fans come to that venue. If you put that on like a, let's just say, Gervonta Tank Davis card, or you mix that up with a, I don't know, Jaron Ennis versus whoever card, that itself will definitely make a lot of money. Or shit, put that on fucking Wilder Fury 3. I don't know. There's plenty of good fights that you can mix it up with. At least if you're going to make a female pay-per-view card, you have to have some good names on the card in order to make that card, in order to make that card sellable. Because what happened with Clarissa Shields going for undisputed with that Mary Eve DeCare woman was that it wasn't promoted well, and it was just poor. I don't even know what to say. It just didn't get promoted properly, and there was poor lack of communication with management trying to set that fight up, and it just didn't work out. I'm pretty sure Clarissa, she got a decent pay-per-view buys on there, but it's like Clarissa should not have to be grinding to sell her brand out. It should be the networks that are going to put her out on there to say, hey, check out Clarissa Shields. She'll be fighting Mary Eve DeCare, blah, blah, blah. I didn't hear that on any fucking sports news radio. At least ESPN, they should have put her name out there for everybody to know. For everyone to know that, hey, Clarissa, she's fighting this Canadian girl on this date for undisputed for the 154-pound division. Come check her out, buy her pay-per-views. No, nobody did. Yeah, nobody didn't do shit about that. It's like, why isn't that being put out on bigger platforms? It's because that nobody doesn't want to give a shit about women's boxing. Until people do, women's boxing will be exploding. There's so many fucking girls out there, especially some girls that I know that actually kick ass. I want to see a Senicia Estrada versus Zarina McCoy. I want to see Marlon Esparza get her butt whooped by Mariana Juarez. I don't care. I want to see the fight. I want to see Kenya Enriquez face Senicia Estrada. Why can't that happen? I want to see Johan Luna get her butt whooped by, I don't know, Mariana Juarez, in a rematch. All these fights can easily be made. Honestly, there needs to be more tournaments in boxing. There should be a Super 6 every single year. If you're a champion, every champion fights each other. It should be, set straight and forward that when you make it to the top in boxing, this is just like my little rule that I like to implement. But, when you make it to the top, you should be able to force a mandatory position to become a world champion. Which I'm not saying when you do become a world champion, I'm saying if you are a world champion, if you want to become undisputed, you should have that freedom and ability to force yourself to be a mandatory to become another world champion. Because back in the old days when there was one belt, other champions at different divisions were able to move up in weight and basically fight another world champion. Because when you move up in weight, you're basically fighting another world champion. So I truly believe that if you're going to have multiple belts in boxing, why not force a mandatory position? Why can't I, a undisputed world champion at 154, go after a champion at 160 that is the WBA, middleweight world champion, knowing that I'm undisputed and I should be able to, fight that world champion, take his or her belt, and then once I become a world champion in that division, then I could just force myself to be a mandatory for all the other champions. Because it makes all the sense in the world, because one, if I do beat you, then two, I'm going to make more money, and three, I'm going to have more exposure to my name because people know they already know who you are as a fighter. So they know that once you get that world title, it just needs to be set in stone to say, okay, Kiernan's a world champion at heavyweight for the WBC. So now if he wants to unify for undisputed, then he should go about his way to force those other fights. Because one, if you don't want to fight this guy and you're going to duck this champion, you should automatically lose your belt, and then, the mandatory gets to fight for that world title against you. That's how, to me personally, I think that's a good idea, and that needs to be enforced more into the sport of boxing, because in the UFC, or at least in MMA, you can't fucking do that. You can't just say, oh no, I'm not gonna fight this guy, blah, blah, blah. How? Honestly, it would be very difficult for you to duck somebody in MMA, because in MMA, at least you have, set, there's set rankings in MMA that basically prevents you from ducking your best competition. So I think for the sport of boxing, it would be a lot easier if you actually had fights, administered at a level where it's not as difficult to make a fight. Because if you want to advance in the world rankings, you have to fight these top tier opponents. You just can't fucking run away from people, because one, you're fucking up everyone's money, and two, you're ruining the sport. So I think that rule should be applied in the sport of boxing, and I think that will make things a lot easier, because the state of women's boxing is really shitty, and I think that people need to start getting serious on women's boxing, because I love watching women's boxing, and I like talking to female fighters that have a good heart. And let's just say if I had a friend or somebody that was a female fighter, it's like, I don't want her to be, sitting, outside in the streets being poor. I want her to, be rich and famous, and see her grind and become, the best in the world. Because, some of these women really do a very good job in performances in their fights, and I give a lot of respect and credibility to them, because they're making the sport a lot better, you know what I'm saying? So I think the word of mouth needs to be spread more, and eventually in the future, women's boxing will become a superpower where everything in the sport will, regulate itself through a marketized competition. And I am more than willing to become an advocate for that, because I don't see why it can't be fixed. Because if it doesn't get fixed, then don't be surprised when any of you idiots come back here asking me, hey, what happened to women's boxing? Women's boxing is no longer around. Oh, well, It's because nobody didn't want to fucking talk about it. And nobody didn't want to ever influence any change on it, because it's not that difficult to put women on a card. You just put them on the card, and then you give them a good amount of money. I'd say, like, to start out, when you're a fighter, you should get paid up to like $50,000 or $100,000 a fight, especially when you're starting out, because one, you have your life on the line, and two, another issue is that boxers, they don't have insurance too. So I think it would be good to make sure every fighter is insured, so that way they have like their healthcare, their dental, they have, you know, a lifetime retirement savings program, so that way boxers don't have to be screwed over after they're done boxing. So like, let's just say if a fighter like Pritchard Colon, if he gets cheated, he should get compensation for it. There should be lawsuits, you know, put in place, and there should be services put in place to help out fighters that do get wrongfully cheated in the sport, which I would definitely want to advocate more enforcement on people who cheat in the sport of boxing, because boxing is a, you know, God-ridden evil sport. Not all the time, but, you know, most of the time, due to massive forms of corruption, people are given the green light to cheat with no, you know, legal, how should I say, with no legal punishment, I would say, and that's not making the sport better. So I'd say until that is fixed, that is when you will start to see the changes in the sport rapidly fix for women's boxing, because there are some very talented female fighters out there, and they don't give enough shine for who they are as a fighter. So I think until that is fixed, that is when you will start to see the sport of women's boxing get better. And until then, let's just keep pushing away, and, you know, start seeing these women on bigger cards, so that way they could start pounding away by having those bigger superstars in the future. Because the only problem out of women's boxing is just marketability and poor notoriety of those fighters. Because all these fucking idiots that try to say, oh no, women's boxing is growing, blah blah blah. If it's fucking growing, why the fuck is Katie Taylor not sharing, or why the fuck is Katie Taylor not pushing for the bigger fights? If she is one of the bigger paid fighters, or the aka cash cow fighters of the sport. If women's boxing is growing, why aren't there more good fights coming up? Like, why aren't more female fighters fighting the best competition? Why aren't we seeing more promotions out of those bigger fights? If you can't answer that question to me, then women's boxing is fucking dead. True. You can't fucking tell me that women's boxing is getting better when there's no more women being put out on bigger fight cards. I don't see no women on Errol Spencer, Manny Pacquiao fight card. I don't see no women on Wilder Fury. I don't see no women on Keith One-Time Thurman versus Ugas, if that happens. Like seriously, people need to stop lying, man. Like, just admit that when you lose, and when you guys understand that women's boxing is shit, then you guys will come back to me and say, Kiernan, you know what? You were fucking right. Women's boxing is really terrible. And that, I will say, fuck you. Because you guys were trying to be ignorant, trying to say that, you know, women's boxing is good and it's all fine and dandy. But at the end of the day, we all know that women's boxing is not doing good. If you guys want the sport to be better, wouldn't you guys want to be advocating for the best to fight the best, but for women to be, for more women to be recognized in the sport? Because if you guys don't give a shit about that, then why the fuck are you guys talking? Right? So yeah, that's pretty much what I gotta say. I appreciate you guys watching. I'm gonna have Miss Zarina McCoy come onto the show, and I'm gonna have a pretty good conversation with her in the future. So I can't wait for that. I hope you guys enjoyed this long conversation that I had. 44 minutes. Yeah, that's what I was expecting. But yeah, be sure to like, hate, comment, subscribe. I don't give a shit about you guys. Don't care about what you feel about me. But for those of you that do ride with me, I appreciate you guys. Shout out to the to the almighty LDBC, and shout out to Black Murderers Row fighters. Thank you guys very much. I will see you guys later, and long live Puerto Rico, and I'm out. Bye.